Hello and welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm Siobhan Holt, news editor at PRWeek and today's host. In this episode, we're going to be looking at client and agency relationships, but with a specific focus on campaign work. It's great to welcome Anna Knowles, Director of PR and Corporate Affairs at EasyJet. Great to have you with us, Anna.
Thank you.
And our second guest today is Sam Corry, the new Managing Director at creative agency Taylor Herring. Welcome, Sam, and congrats on the new role.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
It's great to have you both here today. Thanks for joining us. So, a bit of context for our listeners. EasyJet and Taylor Herring have worked together for 9 years, winning several PRWeek awards along the way, including the Empty Nesters Take Flight campaign, which aimed to help EasyJet reach a wider demographic when recruiting cabin crew. And we're going to talk today about the creative partnership between agency and client and get some perspectives from both sides. So let's kick off. To start, Anna, could you explain a bit about your role, just so people know, and your agency setup at EasyJet?
Of course. So I'm the Director of PR and Corporate Affairs at EasyJet. So I am ultimately responsible for our reputation across all of the countries that we fly to and the countries where we have people and planes that are based. So I work with a team of 17 people, which is pretty lean, I think, across 8 countries that we span. And that's where we have an agency set up to really be an extension of that really experienced team. So we've got 21 agencies altogether across Europe who are helping us in those key countries alongside the internal experts. And that includes 3 in the UK. So in the UK, we have a corporate agency to do our financial PR and help us with that, which is Teneo. We then work with Taylor Herring on our consumer campaigns. And then we also have a public affairs agency, which is FTI. And really the way in which we view these things is that we're looking for our PR agencies to help us build brand affinity. The team is really busy and stretched. It's a very reactive, operational environment. A lot happens. We are carrying 250,000 people every single day. And so that means that a lot happens on a daily basis and the team have to be ready to be able to respond and react. But we still want to be able to say what our own narrative is and keep the consumer activity and keep us front of mind and build that brand affinity. And that's what we're looking for our agencies to do.
Brilliant. I imagine that's quite a balancing act with the handling the crisis.
Absolutely.
threat.
It's something that we work on every single day. So we make sure that we've got a plan in place across each of those countries, which will differ slightly depending on the environment in that country and the media setup. But we want to make sure that we are consistently telling our story, as well as being able to manage really adeptly our reactive side of the coin.
Brilliant. So then how does the partnership with Taylor Herring work? How did it originally begin?
Well, we've got PRWeek to thank for that, actually.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We didn't have retained consumer agency when I first started, and we just really used agencies on an ad hoc basis, on a project basis. And I came to judge the PRWeek Awards and got a number of categories to look through. And there was a lot of Taylor Herring work across those categories. And it was campaigns I'd seen organically. And then when you read the award entry, you could see the impact they had and the creativity that was put into them. So following judging the awards, I contacted James and we met up for a coffee and I set them a bit of a challenge. Over the summer period, it's our busiest time. And we're constantly sort of trying to manage our reputation and also demonstrate to our customers that we're trying to do things to help them over that period, particularly families. So the challenge that was set to the agency was come back with some ideas of some campaigns that could work over the summer period to help rebalance that coverage and generate positive noise for us. And that's when Flybreeze came about.
Yeah, so, I mean, maybe I should tell
I was
little bit
gonna
of the
say,
story
yeah.
of Flybreeze, because well, Flybraries is a pun on flying libraries. It's probably one of our better ones. I'd say,
And Sam knows if there's a pun in a campaign headline, I'm already partly in.
It's a win.
But like in a nutshell, this campaign was about tackling 2 very real problems. The first being, if you've ever been on an aeroplane with a child, you know it's a monumental task to keep them entertained. I have a 2-year-old toddler. I would not recommend flying with him. It's a nightmare. Usually the solve is putting a digital device, and I'm certainly guilty of that. And so we know lots of parents, that's a real challenge over the summer period when they're flying. The second thing we identified was at the time, reading for pleasure was in decline in the UK. There were a number of reports from government saying that the reading age for children under the age of 11 was at an all-time low. And so we thought, what if we could help parents keep their kids entertained, but also tackle a societal and educational issue by giving children access to books on a plane and get them hooked on a book over the course of the summer. And so Flybreeze was born. We partnered with Penguin Random House to put 7,000 copies of children's books, including likes of Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, The Railway Children, on 150 aircraft, which is no logistical mean feat. If you ever worked in the airline industry, it's incredibly difficult and complicated putting stuff on a plane. But luckily, the team at EasyJet looked after all of that bit of the headache for us. But essentially, we created flying lending libraries, which meant that kids could pick up a book once they got on the plane, have a read, and then put it back into seat pockets when they finished, ready for the next passenger. And it was a really beautiful campaign, I think, because it got a lot of praise from the education minister at the time, won a ton of awards. And then in the second year of the campaign, because it went for 3 years, we gave ourselves an even bigger headache.
Okay.
We decided that we would roll this out on a pan-European level. So that meant this was going to be activated in all of the regions that EasyJet flew to. So we actually stocked 300 aircraft with 17,500 books, which you imagine the logistical challenges going up and up and up here. And they were translated into 7 languages, which meant children all around Europe could benefit from the initiative. And so, I look back on it with a lot of pride, that campaign. I think it was a really sweet piece of work. But if I look at the results and the impact of it, which going back to what Anna said right at the start, which was about the real challenge here, was about how could we be helpful to our customers? How could we offset the reactive negative media that we know all of the airline industry faces over the summer? Well, if we look back at the results of that, the sentiment scores amongst customers over the summer period were at an all-time high, and the amount of media coverage meant that EasyJet wasn't drowned out by any other the reactive media at the time.
And is that a balance that you have to strike every summer, I imagine, together?
Every single day.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of preparation that goes into it with the in-house team in terms of preparing statements, understanding, having a really close relationship with operations. So understanding what's likely to happen that day. Is there anything that's particularly going to cause us issues in a particular area? And some things that come completely out of the blue. So like the air traffic control outage on the bank holiday on the busiest day of the year. So we're ready, and we have a very close relationship with ops to understand what's happening in the operation and how can we help manage that for customers and explain and be on the front foot with media before they come to us.
Brilliant. And obviously you talked there about a relationship. So this is a very long relationship at 9 years. So how would you guys say it's changed then during that time?
I mean, it started, as I say, as a kind of ad hoc campaigning relationship. I think it's deepened over that time. I think Taylor Herring did a very good job consistently delivering results for the consumer campaign and got a deeper understanding of the airline as a whole. And so that meant that they became a bit more embedded. But I would say that a point at which it really step changed was COVID, which obviously for all businesses was an unprecedented situation. But for airlines, we were the first to go into the crisis and we were the last to come out of the crisis. And so during that time, we were grounded for 11 weeks. And over that period of time, it was really around communicating with the market and making sure that from a financial and a corporate perspective, we were reassuring the market around what was happening and our shareholders. So there was very much a kind of financial comms focus to begin with to work our way through that. Although it had started actually operationally with countries kind of shutting down their borders to us, it very much moved on to a financial story. And then we were grounded for 11 weeks, which was completely unthinkable beforehand. And then it became obvious that actually we need consumer PR to help get us back off the ground again, because we were going to relaunch flights. The whole environment was very different. The flying environment was different. There was a nervousness because of the health implications. And so we needed to do a very different kind of a campaign at that point around communicating the health and safety measures that we'd taken. But we also wanted to do that in a way that was warm, that welcomed people back to the skies, rather than something that was very dry and informational. And so I phoned up Taylor Herring and said, this is a kind of common theme, we need to turn something around really fast. You probably are going to have quite a lot of trouble filming anything because weren't allowed in large groups at that point. So we had to jump through lots of hoops to do that. But we felt that they would be able to build in those elements, so the kind of informational side, but also building out the warmth of the story. So we came up with the children's mask idea as well to make it better for them on board. And I think over that period of time, we did a big launch day at Gatwick when we were flying again with film crews, and we had, a kind of multifaceted campaign by that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think working together through the pandemic, where no one really knew what was going to happen next, and no one knew how long it was going to last. I think the whole experience, which I think was emotional, complex, and we had to tread really carefully with our comms, I think really bound the agency client relationship together in a way that you can't imagine. Imagine. I remember the team and I travelling to Gatwick quite a lot through the pandemic, being on the tarmac, people in the sort of biohazard suits all around, trying to work out how to do photography and video, how to create assets on the ground when the restrictions meant you couldn't be close to anyone, you had to wear face masks, and so on and so forth. And so it was really, really challenging. And I think the word pivot was the word at the time that everyone was using in PR. Everyone sounded like Ross from Friends trying to move that sofa. But if you worked in the airline industry, it was a gigantic pivot. And so, Anna gave us that call, and really kind of the focus was in 3 areas, which was about reassuring and boosting customer confidence as we went back to flying, relaunching the airline, of course, but also supporting customers through lockdown, because we went back into lockdowns. Obviously, no one knew that was going to happen.
A few times over.
A few times.
Yeah.
And so it ended up being a very 2-year program of work. And there was lots of elements to it. Anna touched on the beginning bit, which was very a grown-up piece of work, really, which was about reassurance to customers. So we did a lot of comms that were around, the state of the art, HEPA filters, what the customer journey would be like going through the airport from the minute you walk in the door to the minute you land, to really assure customers that we were doing everything possible to ensure their safety and that flying was safe. But then, of course, we were looking at where we could do moments of joy as well. And Anna mentioned the face mask campaign for kids, which was, again, a really sweet campaign. It was about delivering joy, which was, we had the insight that, for kids flying generally anyway, outside of COVID, it can be a daunting experience getting on a plane, but even more so if lots of people are wearing face masks, including your own family. And so we tried to do what we wanted to do was flip the narrative on it. And so we tasked Will Sliney, he was a Marvel artist, drew all sorts of Marvel characters, to actually create a range of face masks that were all superhero inspired. So we had a lion face mask, we had a pilot face mask, so all these kids looked super cool while wearing their face masks on board. And we distributed them all throughout Europe. And I remember, because we were obviously working in this quite strange way, where we were working from home, but also doing some key work on the ground as well, the masks got delivered, the prototype masks got delivered to Anna's house. And I don't know, do you want to...
Yeah, my daughter, who was the right age at the time, then modelled on the Teams call the mask to make sure that it was the right size for the right sort of age group. We tried them out, made sure that it sat correctly. So everything was done remotely. So that campaign, I think, was a really... I don't think there was any other airline doing anything like that at the time, and it did a job for the industry as a whole. But the other thing I think, which Sam touched on, is over the course of the pandemic, given the various lockdowns and other pauses to flying, we wanted to stay in touch with our customers during that time when they weren't going to be flying with us. So we're used to flying 100 million people a year. And then over that period of time, it's a fraction of that. So how could PR help us with that as well? And how could it help solve problems for people, the things that they're facing during lockdown, so that we can be a friend and build that affinity with them? So we did a number of campaigns over the course of the pandemic as well, which seems counterintuitive when we weren't flying.
Yeah.
How does the partnership then work with the ideation process? Because you've just given a couple of great examples of campaigns there, but where do you start with those sort of campaigns? What's the angle for the PR team?
I would say that a lot of the campaigns have started with a seed of a good idea, which is it could come from either side. A lot come from the business itself. So a lot of ideas have come out of business issues we're trying to solve, that we think actually there's something really interesting here to lean into the problem as opposed to shy away from the problem. It's quite an iterative process, I would say. it sort of starts with a seed of idea, we build on it, we rely on Taylor Herring to really then layer on how do you structure that campaign to get the most amount of coverage, what's going to work for the news media. And we make sure that from a brand perspective, the messaging is the right messaging that we're trying to get across. So it's a very collaborative process, I would say. One example would be the Empty Nester campaign, which you mentioned earlier. That really came from, well, I mean, all of those things really combined. It was from, there was an issue from a kind of governmental perspective of people going back to work post-pandemic. So there was a lot of talk about getting the over 50s back to work. So that was kind of in the background. We had a challenge as an airline to get enough quality staff back into the airline business, because obviously we had lost a lot of staff over that period of time when we weren't flying. And then anecdotally, my sister-in-law was a flight attendant and then had left while she had her children. Her children went to university. She went back to flying. And so Holly and I looked at the stats to say, is there something in this? Is this something that is happening in the background? And it was. I phoned Sam and he literally said, empty nesters fly again, and I was in again.
I love it. You're great with the top line there, aren't you? You know exactly what we want as media. I love it.
Straight in, not 25-page decks of ideas.
So how does it work from your side then with a team, like with your team and bringing those ideas?
So just to touch on the empty nesters piece, and I could talk about how the sort of ideation works on campaigns. But, you know, that was a really important piece of work for EasyJet, because it goes back to the core values of what the brand is about, which is about being an inclusive employer. And often a lot of the work that we do is about fighting stereotypes in the industry and also generally in society as well. And, you know, one of those stereotypes that's baked in is that cabin crew is a job for young person, where in fact that's really couldn't be further from the truth. And so we wanted to create a recruitment campaign that was very much about shining a spotlight on the fact that the role as cabin crew could be for anyone at any age. And we put together a big piece of research that was really looking about, you know, talking to the over 50s, and specifically those parents where their kids had flown the nest, to ask what would they be doing like later in life. And kind of the resounding vibes that we got back from the data was that a lot of them were looking for a challenge later in life, actually a new career even, and really zoning in on passion points, and travel being a huge passion point for people. And the role of cabin crew actually being really attractive for those later in life, because it has a huge amount of transferable skills. Like EasyJet has a lot of cabin crew that were formerly army vets, police, nurses, teachers. These are all great person focused jobs that actually transfer brilliantly into the role of cabin crew. And so we kind of really shone a spotlight on that by heroing the people at EasyJet who already work in those roles. And so we had Mike, Karen and Neil. They fronted up our newsworthy ads that we created, and then we had them on the sort of sofas of This Morning, and we had lots of radio interviews and features around it as well, and we had a kind of really visual campaign that told the story of taking up a career later in life. And I think one of the great case studies in it, which I really liked, was Neil, who was 55 at the time. He was actually following in the footsteps of his daughter, who was 30 years old, and she'd been cabin crew for a while. So he was actually following in his daughter's footsteps, which presented a beautiful case study for us. But when you were talking about the ideation piece, and this links in quite nicely to this, is about how we think about campaigns and working with Anna's team. And, you know, there's always a desire, I think, to want to do fresh stuff, of course, and that's really, really important. But there's also a lot of value in the work that we do where we double down on a strategy that's been a long-term strategy. So I'll work with sort of female pilots, I'll work in D&I, I'll work with recruitment. There are campaigns that we've activated against year on year, because these are problems or issues that aren't going to go away being solved with one campaign. These are issues that, you know, you need to go back to year on year, because they might take a generation to actually solve. And I think that kind of work that we've been doing, that sort of brand purpose work, is really authentic, because, as I said, it plays back to the core values of the airline and is work that we can be all really proud of and is actually changing the direction of the business going forward.
And I think that's a point that's probably worth talking through, because with all of the campaigns that we have done, as I say, a lot have started with business problems we're trying to solve. but they also, as well as the coverage and the brand enhancing elements that come through, they've delivered business results. So with Empty Nesters, for example, it has delivered results for us. And so that older demographic has grown, and they're people that we really welcome. They have huge life experience. So it delivers results for the business, and they've proven to do that time and time again. So we can see that coming through in recruitment numbers. So real business results are really important, as well as the other kind of halo from the brand enhancing side of things.
And obviously there's a real challenge now with how to find the right spokesperson or spokespeople for your brand. Do you find that this works in the campaigns as well, having...
I mean, very much putting our people front and centre. I mean, it's partly, I think, the brand, and so it works very well for EasyJet, but it's also in an airline space, people are fascinated with what happens behind the cockpit door, what happens for crew, so I think they always want to understand how that works and get a bit of an insight. But also I think it's very authentic to the brand to put our people front and centre. That's really, we talk about orange spirit internally. That's kind of what keeps the airlines going. It differentiates us from other carriers.
Absolutely.
Just to build on that, I think every PR campaign that you see from EasyJet will have either crew, pilots, engineers or ops team in the actual campaign itself. I don't think we've probably done a campaign.
Or the children of EasyJet.
Or the children
staff.
of EasyJet stuff. We'll feature in them. We put them at the heart of everything we do. And I think that's important because, brands generally often talk about wanting to be loved or wanting to be trusted. But the fact is that no one trusts or loves a faceless corporation. People love and trust humans. And so we really lean into that with all the campaigns that we do. We show the human side of the business, and that's the way we connect emotionally with our audience.
At the moment, there's a lot in the news, especially in PR, about the rollback of purpose. How do you think that's going to impact going forward?
For us, I still think purpose is going to be important going forward. I think it's just how you execute the campaigns to keep it interesting and fresh and different. But I do think it's something that really works for a brand like EasyJet. We're the original democratizer of travel. And I don't think there's many brands that really have stayed as true to their origins as EasyJet. I think we improve people's lives. We've given people access to travel. And I think this is the right area for us to be playing in. But I think there's fun ways of doing that. If you look at the female pilot and the pilot diversity work we've done a number of iterations with that. And actually that started from looking at gender pay from the government reporting requirements and realizing that the gender pay was going to be hugely skewed because of the gender imbalance in our pilot community. And so the work we've done there has really driven and changed the face of the industry, as well as being reputationally enhancing at the same time.
So how do you balance that coverage then, obviously, because you've got consumer work and then there's the PA work within that, because your role is it's all encompassing, I think we can say. So I'm just interested how you balance that. You've obviously mentioned there that it's very driven by sort of targets or aims set by the business. I was just wondering if you could expand on that.
Yeah, there is an overall strategy that obviously we work towards. I mean, we cover a huge area within my teams because we will do all of the corporate and the financial messaging and reporting to the city. We will do all of the consumer campaigning. We also cover public affairs, and that's across obviously all of the countries in Europe that we have people and planes essentially, and then travel, media. So there's a huge scope for us to do. And really it's about making sure that we give each of that the right attention, because you can easily get lost in the reactive or in the crisis. And we've got to make sure, actually, I think what we've done really well is create opportunity from crisis over that period of time. So really it's around just carving out each of those areas. A lot of the PR work that we do is very related to the PA works. We do a lot of PR for PA, particularly in our European countries, where we'll run things like sustainability classes so people can understand what our net zero goals are and the roadmap. So we'll invite stakeholders and politicians, but we'll roll out something similar for journalists at the same time. And it's the interplay between the two. So they work really, really hand in hand in terms of the messaging for government. And a lot of that will come through the messaging that we use our spokespeople. So our CEO over the course of COVID actually became, a really probably the most vocal person talking about lifting of restrictions and getting back back to travel. So really it's about, I think, making sure you focus on each of those areas, but you've got to have consistent messaging, and it's got to make sense throughout the piece. So, a lot of our overarching messages will still come through in our consumer campaigns, but would also come through in our financial reporting.
And I'm interested then, Sam, from your perspective, because obviously you're then a piece within this jigsaw. How does that work from your side?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think that because one of your questions we asked was about keeping it fresh, and if I can't link the two questions together, which is like, how do we keep coming up with campaigns over 9 years, and how do we balance it with the work that Anna's doing? Well, I think we're always able to put fresh stuff on the table because we spend a lot of time with Anna and her team, but more broadly we spend time talking to the recruitment team, we spend time talking to the ops team, we spend time talking to the engineering team. You can go over to the hangar at Luton and spend a day there and walk away with beautiful nuggets of stories and insights, and you get to listen to the real business problems that are happening within the airline itself. And I can't stress enough to people who work in PR about spending time with their client, and not just the PR and marketing teams. Actually walking the floors of the whole operation is actually really important, because that's how you really unearth the sort of nuggets of insights that you can then really double down on and really can actually get upstream of the business problems and make real change. I heard over the Christmas period, because I was thinking about this podcast because it was coming on for us, so I was listening to other podcasts at the time, and actually a chief strategy officer at an ad agency was talking about this, and I thought it resonated with me quite a lot. And that person said, when you're in a relationship for a long time with a client, you start working on areas of the business, in inverted commas, that are unsexy or boring, or perceived to be unsexy, boring. But actually the facts are they are the most interesting parts of the business, because that's where you can actually implement real change, where you can really affect the bottom line and create real business solutions. So you kind of move from being a PR to being a partner with your client, or being almost like a business consultant, if you like, with the client. And that's where I think we can add real value. So in terms of kind of how we balance, the work that we're doing with Anna, we're always looking at where we can actually help the business move in a new direction beyond delivering lots of media coverage.
Just to follow on from your points there, though, Sam, how do you guys you've obviously done ideas that you've gone back to. How do you do campaigns that still use maybe a same topic but bring it on the next level? Or because that can be quite challenging to bring a fresh idea to that's something that you've already done before. So I'd be interested to know how that works.
Yeah, I think from a pilot diversity perspective, I mean, I don't know how many campaigns we've done now. As Sam mentioned earlier, it is a problem that is going to take a generation to solve. And the stereotypes are really, really well ingrained. And so there is a job to do, but it feels like it's endlessly interesting to the media. And we've tackled it in a number of different ways over the years. We've brought it to life with children in a couple of campaigns that we did. And we also did the documentary. So we did Inside the Cockpit, specifically to target people in their living rooms, to say, we want to change the face of the pilot community and bring diversity into it. So we've taken quite a few risks along the way as well with that. But I think each time you think, is there more that we can get out of this? And each time we find another way of doing it. And the most recent with the pilot billboard was a really eye-catching way of bringing it to life again, but in a completely different way to any of the campaigns that preceded it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that our challenge is always try to find a new insight that we can attack really hard and go after. And so, some examples of those is that one of the first campaigns we ever did, our insight was essentially that stereotypes about a career for a boy or a girl started at a very young age. In fact, when we actually talked to the female pilots at EasyJet, their feedback was that when they were young, they never had considered that a pilot was a job for them. And so we thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe we can go after that.
And is it from conversations that you're getting these ideas, or is it research that's bringing that, Sam? Which one is it that's sort of bringing that creative idea?
It's a mixture of the two. As I kind of previously said, I think spending time in your client's business and going speaking to the actual people that work there, that's where you get your best insights for campaigns from. So it's a mixture of both actually talking to real people that work in those jobs, but also data that we know that exists within the airline industry, but also stuff that we might create ourselves as well. So I think there's a real mix there. But, in terms of then how we activate against it, I mentioned starting from a young age, those stereotypes, we essentially flip the narrative on it by reshooting shot for shot that scene from Catch Me If You Can, where Leonardo DiCaprio is walking through the terminal flanked by female cabin crew. And because Hollywood's a massive perpetrator of stereotypes, we thought, well, we'll stick it to Hollywood. And so we reshot that with a young girl who was about 9 years old. Her mum was, in fact, a captain in the EasyJet crew. And she was then taking the role of Leo. She was standing in the middle, and she had a flank of boys playing cabin crew either side, aged 5 to 10, also all EasyJet kids as well, I must say. And so we replicated that scene, essentially shot for shot. And we went after Hollywood again, actually, a few years later with Top Gun, another film that's like heavily just male pilots, and we kind of gave that the parody treatment as well. But as I said, we looked at different insights across different campaigns, and this time last year, we actually conducted an experiment in a school, because we found data that pointed to that 1 in 17 flights that you'll be on, that voice that comes over the tannoy, this is your captain speaking, you'd only hear that about 1 in 17 from a female voice. And so we thought, well, maybe we can play into that. So we conducted an experiment in a school, and we asked kids to basically role play different jobs. So they were doing a nurse, they were doing a builder, they were doing a doctor, they were doing an airline pilot, and we had all sorts of stuff laid out for them: moustaches, beards, the outfits, and so on and so forth. And then we asked them also to give their person a name, and also then start speaking in their voice. Now, every single kid, both boy and girl, put on a deep voice as the pilot and called themselves a male name, and all of them were, "This is your captain speaking." And it really showed that this stereotype is really ingrained from a very, very young age.
Interesting. So I was going to say that you were talking about research and data, but I'm just wondering then, how does the measurement side afterwards? What is it you're looking for to take to the C-suite and demonstrate afterwards?
I think it's the real business results is important. I mean, I love showing a huge deck of loads of coverage and really impactful coverage. We try and make sure that the messaging really comes through those pieces as well. That's done and cut and crafted very, very carefully. But real business results as well. I mean, from the female pilot perspective, we started off on this work, we had 128 female pilots, and we now have more than 300. And that has genuinely been driven almost all of it by the PR campaigns we've done over the years, the changing of those perceptions of the job. And so, yeah, from my perspective, it's more around demonstrating the value to the business that can be brought from consumer PR, that it's not just, a fluffy tool where you can land some messages or just get a bit of brand awareness. We don't need brand awareness. Everybody knows who EasyJet is. We want them to understand and to have some affinity with us and build that relationship with them. So yeah, I'm not someone who is, I think it's really hard to properly measure and evaluate PR campaigns. I think it's a kind of age-old issue, but I think when it's successful, and there are some metrics that you can play with, and the business benefits help outside of the PR department.
Excellent. So talking about past campaigns, but do you have any coming up that you can tell us about?
Well, it is a big year for EasyJet. We've kicked it off with a big travel audit for a campaign that we did last week, looking at where people are going to travel, how they're going to travel, how that's going to change this year, at a point where it's a really busy booking period. But it's an important year for us. We actually are going to reach the old age of 30 in November. And so you will see not necessarily work that is specific to the birthday, but more our values really infused into the work that we do over the course of the year. And then we have some exciting expansions. So we're going to be flying out of Southend and put a base in Southend. And we've also got some expansion in Italy. So they're the things that are on the horizon at the moment.
Brilliant.
And also we have a new CEO who's just taken over on the 1st of January. So a lot of work just getting him out to the media and establishing him.
A lot of thought leadership plans, I imagine.
That's right.
And so how do you guys work then on planning? I know that obviously you know the birthday and when that's coming up, but what's sort of the calendar like normally for you guys?
Well, we look across the year. So I'd say probably 4 or 5 times a year, Sam and I will sit down and say, and sort of scan and say, what have we got that's coming up? We like to look for something over the summer period still to help balance that coverage. Some of it is led by news from the business. And so we kind of map out what a kind of rolling 12 months looks like.
Yeah, but also leaving space to be quite reactive and agile.
Yeah.
I mean, our sort of model of now working with EasyJet is kind of mirror the volatility of the airline industry. I've got a team.
It's no mean feat.
Yeah, we've got a team that can be on the ground at Gatwick the very next day doing something for Anna's team if needed in terms of support. We might be doing a really fast turnaround poll on sort of customer sentiment around travel. Or it might even be helping with an announcement that might happen. But we have to leave some spaces in our calendar for eventualities which we know which will happen throughout the year. But we try to do as much long-range planning as we can. Like, as Anna says, we have our staple moments where it might be about driving sales or brand love, but also with thinking about where our ongoing campaigns, which are around D&I or recruitment, etc., fit into that overall map as well.
And how many members of your team do you have assigned specifically for EasyJet, if you say that they can be out on the ground?
Well, we've got two teams at Taylor Herring because we look after EasyJet Airlines and we also look after EasyJet Holidays. So we've got a split team. There's 5 in each. I oversee the airline and James oversees the holidays piece, but we work very much hand in hand. Like Anna just mentioned, the travel report that we put out last week was a very wide-ranging report fueled by experts, really looking into the economic, the behavioural piece around what consumers would be doing this year. And that was a joint authored report between the two teams. So we've got a fair bit of muscle for the client. That means we can be deployed very quickly on campaigns.
So Sam, then how closely then do you work with the other parts of the comms function? Because obviously Anna's mentioned that it's pan-European team, it's Teneo and FTI. So how does that all work?
Yeah, I'll start on the European piece because that's really interesting because, whatever we try to do, we try to strive to create campaigns that will work on a pan-European level. That's a real challenge because, each country has its own cultural nuances, has its own insights and consumer behaviour that our sort of one-size-fits-all approach doesn't always work. And so what we do is we often speak to the PR teams locally to say, here's a nugget of an idea, here's an insight that we're working on. Does this resonate in your country? And to understand whether that actually would work from a pan-European perspective. And sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it does. But, I think an example of one campaign which was hugely successful across all the markets was a campaign we did last Christmas. Also, the Christmas before, I should say. There's so many campaigns, I'm losing the timeline. It was a campaign we did last Christmas, which was called Letters to Santa. And there was a universal insight that kids going on holiday during the festive period were worried and had anxiety about the fact that Santa wouldn't know where they would be if they were on holiday and away from their home. There we go, cue the R. That's the emotional connection we're looking for. And so what we did was we actually put post boxes in airports across Europe where kids who were flying over the festive period could pop their letter of what their wish list was to Santa in the postbox with their address of where they were staying, whether it was a hotel or with family elsewhere and so on and so forth. And then we would deliver those letters because we have flights to Lapland. We would actually physically deliver those letters, and we delivered thousands of them over the Christmas period. But that campaign was activated across pretty much every region in the EasyJet Fly 2.
Brilliant. So you're both experienced comms professionals. In your view, what breaks down an agency relationship? What should comms pros watch out for?
So I think trust is really important. And if trust breaks down, then I think it's really difficult to continue from there. You have to be able to trust that the agency can deliver the coverage, that they're working, really, really hard for you, and that you can trust them with sensitive information. So I think that is something, it feels very obvious, but I think that is really true. And I also think, I think complacency, if that creeps in over a longer period of time, I'm not suggesting it has, but it's not quite as harsh as you're only as good as your last campaign, but you have to have agencies that are going to consistently deliver. It's really important that everybody stays really engaged in the process, and it helps if the agency really understands and actually really likes the brand and likes the company. Then I think it's much easier to be delivering on the same goals.
Yeah, I echo all the points that Anna said, but I'd add that the agency should be an extension of the client's in-house team. Now, Anna's team knows their sector press really, really well. They rely on us to give them the breadth with the consumer contacts that we have. And I feel that, feel really strongly that the sort of we are the client, you are the agency way of thinking is hugely detrimental and damaging to any relationship. You have to be partners. That's a much healthier way to frame a relationship. And that's very much how we feel working together. And I also think giving the partnership time to build is really important. Brands aren't built with strategies that change every quarter or every year. That's really kind of short-term thinking. Brands are built by doubling down on long-term objectives and strategy. And Anna and I have worked together for 9 years, essentially on the same strategy, really, through many of our sort of various work streams that we've touched on, whether it's customer love, whether it's female pilots or recruitment or DE&I. So I think that having that trust that Anna said to build a long-term relationship is really important.
And openness, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, we're really candid with each other. Yeah, really candid with each other, I think. But honest feedback means you can move, and we have to move so quick on stuff. There isn't time really to not be candid. But I think that's helped us produce the best work really together.
And how do you balance that with, because obviously Anna's not your only client, got a lot at Taylor Herring. How do you balance that, the competing clients, really?
Well, like with every agency, there's lots of clients on the roster that
obviously
you need to
puts
serve.
me first.
No question.
But that's why we have real depth in our team. We not only got the client services team who work very closely and really are embedded into Anna's team, really love the business, really know the business. We've got a really strong creative team that work across all of the EasyJet work as well, and a really strong production unit as well. So there's real breadth and depth to the agency, which gives Anna and team reassurance and all our clients reassurance that we can deliver for them.
Sam, while I've got you though, I've got to mention that you've been recently promoted to your MD role. Congratulations. So what are your plans then for 2025?
Thank you very much first. Well, look, the catch-all remit for my job really is innovation in order to drive growth. And I think our industry is a really interesting juncture actually at the moment. I think there's three things happening concurrently, which is informing that. I think the shape and flavour of what clients is buying is changing. The briefs are very much about how do we get people talking? How do we feed the WhatsApp chats? And rather than being prescriptive about the channel, i.e. we want to be in national newspapers, it's much more about where do we best meet the consumer where they are. And so creating integrated campaigns is key to this. It's one of the reasons why we launched our brand experience division, which is St. Mark's Studios, which is about creating shareable out-of-home events, retail activations, all baked in with the earn first thinking of Taylor Herring. So that's kind of one of my big focuses for the year. The second piece, I think, as I mentioned, there was three. The second piece is around the media landscape. I think that's evolving at a rate of knots. I spent a lot of last year meeting with the big publishers about their strategies around social news and social news distribution. And I think that the PR industry is quite behind the curve on that. So future-proofing media relations is another piece that I'm looking at. And I think that comes sort of slightly hand in hand with the last point, which I'm looking at, which is around talent and skill set.
Yeah.
I think that long in the PR industry, we've been really proud about being PR generalists, if you like. And I think that's made our industry quite unique because it's produced a lot of really brilliant people. But at the same time, I think that there is a move away from PR generalism to specialism. And I liken it to sort of building a house. If you don't get a builder in to do the whole house, you bring the carpenter in, you bring the sparky in, you bring the plumber in to do specialist kind of jobs. And when we're talking about integrated campaigns, we're talking about bringing in real experts that can help deliver on those pieces of the campaign that bring it all together in one place. And so I think looking at the talent that we bring in and a future-ready skill workforce is where my head's at.
Brilliant. Very interesting, and one we'll watch with interest, I'm sure. Well, thank you both for speaking on today's episode, and I hope you've enjoyed listening to the podcast. Do check out prweek.co.uk for all the latest news and all the great events too that are coming up in 2025. It's also your last chance to enter the PR Week People and Places Awards. This is a new award scheme which spotlights the individuals and workplaces that are making a real difference in the world of PR. And the deadline for that is the 16th of January, so very close, so enter ASAP. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, then we'd love it if you could leave a review, please, wherever you access Beyond the Noise. So thanks for listening, and goodbye.